Welcome back to Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Today, we welcome back our good friend and Dolby Institute Fellowship winner, Carlos López Estrada, for another of his incredible discussions about filmmaking. This was recorded in front of a live audience at the 2024 Sundance Film Festival. Carlos asked the question to the filmmakers on his panel, is no-budget filmmaking even possible in this day and age? As usual, this conversation is insightful and thought-provoking, but since this one is also about money, it gets a little spicy. This is all part of our ongoing Satellite Sessions series, which we're bringing to you in partnership with Anti-Gravity Academy and the Coalition of Asian Pacifics in Entertainment, as well as the co-presenter of this particular event, Macro. Info on all of these organizations is available in our show notes. But for now, let's talk about show business with Carlos.
Thanks for coming. My name is Carlos López Estrada. I'm a director. I'm also the founder of Anti-Gravity Academy. We're a production company that specializes in creating opportunities for emerging filmmakers. We have a movie in the festival called Didi. If you get a chance to see it, please pass by. And we're very happy to be having this conversation. No budget filmmaking. And you know, this is no news to anyone here, but filmmaking is neither accessible nor affordable. There's a very select group of people who get to call themselves filmmakers. And those people need to have access to capital, to equipment, to specialized knowledge that you can really only attain through costly formal education. So the barrier into filmmaking is impossibly high for most people. And we're here to try to discuss whether we can do anything as filmmakers who have miraculously crossed that barrier to make it a little bit easier for the people who are coming up behind us. So I'm going to welcome 3 incredible filmmakers, and we are so lucky to have them. So first, we're going to have Bao Nguyen. He is an Emmy-nominated Vietnamese-American filmmaker whose work has been seen on HBO, Netflix, The New York Times, ESPN. He directed Be Water, a deep dive into the life and journey of Bruce Lee, competed in the U.S. documentary competition in 2020 here at Sundance, and was invited to South by Southwest, Cannes, Telluride, Hot Docs, many others. I'm gonna keep going because there's lots of great stuff here. His greatest film, The Greatest Night in Pop, feature documentary about the making of the seminal global hit We Are the World, just premiered 2 days ago. Everyone I know loves it, and I can't wait to see it. And it's launching on Netflix in January 29th. Is this true? Congrats, Bao. Thank you. That's soon. Please see it. If you don't get to catch it here, see it there. Then we have Rishi Rajani. He oversees all divisions across Hillman Grad, guiding strategic direction and developing new business partnerships across the company. His producing credits include The Chai, 20s, Boomerang, the 40-year-old version, 2001, which received the Grand Jury Prize here at the U.S. Dramatic Competition, Sundance 2023, and got a million other awards. What else? All your bios are pretty extensive, so I'm trying to. He also originated Indeed's Rising Voices film program. I don't know if you know about it, but it's a pretty incredible initiative. He serves as an executive mentor for the Hillman Grad Mentorship Lab and launched a South Asian mentorship program under The Salon. Welcome, Rishi. And last but not least, we have Justin Simeon. He's a writer, a director, a producer of both television and film. In 2014, he wrote and directed his first feature film, critically acclaimed Dear White People, premiered here at Sundance Film Festival, where it won the Special Jury Award for Breakthrough Talent. It was then released by Lionsgate and Roadside Attractions, and then he adapted the film into a critically acclaimed Netflix series of the same name. He returned to Sundance 2020 with the world premiere of his second feature, Bad Hair, an amazing movie. It was picked up by Hulu, where it broke record number of subscriber signups. And recently, he directed his third feature film, Disney's Haunted Mansion, released theatrically last summer. He's currently executive producing a bunch of TV projects through his production company, Culture Machine. Welcome, three of you. Thank you very much for being here. So lots of these panels encourage you to think about the past, your journey here, the brilliant work you've done. But for this particular one, we're going to try to encourage you to think about the future, and not necessarily your future, our future, but the one for the people who want to do what we have been lucky enough to do. And not only necessarily the people who are shooting their thesis in film school and making low-budget music videos, but also the people who don't even get to think of themselves as filmmakers, who don't even know that that is a possibility. And that is because our culture and our industry has set these like impossible set of barriers that have prevented a lot of people from even believing that this is something that could lie ahead for them. So the first question is to all. This is meant to be a conversation, so please, whoever wants to jump in, and feel free to interrupt whenever you want. But in your opinion, what are the key barriers preventing accessibility to filmmaking? And do you have any sense, do you believe that these could be overcome? Is there a future where people can get to make movies, maybe for no money, but as close as possible to no money? Should I start with you, Val?
Okay, you can start with me. Sure.
You're a documentary filmmaker, and I'm sure that you are very familiar with making a lot with very little.
Yeah, well, thank you all for coming on a Sunday morning. I'm sure a lot of people were partying to Too Short last night, so maybe people just slept over here. Yeah, I mean, so my last film, Be Water, which is about Bruce Lee, it took like 5 years to get financing for a film about Bruce Lee. And Bruce Lee, I would imagine, was one of the most famous iconic figures of the 20th century, but at the same time, no one had the belief, and this was during sort of the so-called golden age of documentary as well, and it was really impossible. And for me as a filmmaker, I mean, I can't speak on the financing side from that perspective, but 2 years into looking into financing, I was still passionate about the project. I think for us filmmakers, we have to continue our dedication to the idea, to the concept, to the project, and hope is a weird word to use in many ways because it's not a tangible thing, but I just hope that the vision and the film would get the financing because of the passion. I think, there's a saying like, you can't fail if you don't give up. And so I hope on the financing side, that is what happens too, because I see when it was the so-called golden age of documentary, the pendulum swung so far in the opposite direction that once one project failed, everyone sort of just kind of gave up. But if there's a sustainable model where people are just like, okay, you can have one failure, but we're going to invest in the system. We're going to invest in the long-term strategy, especially for documentaries, where people will make better films if you just give them the time and the dedication for it. So that's how I kind of see the future is not thinking of it as just a pendulum swinging in one direction, but continuing to push that movement forward where we're not it's not just a drop in the bucket in terms of financing. And we have people who are philanthropic investors who might drop, they're billionaires who okay, I'm just going to dabble in filmmaking as a side job. But for us, it's our livelihood, our passions. And so if they see it in the way that they see their business models for other things, then I think we can create something where it's a forward momentum rather than a trend.
I do too. Rishi, can I jump over to you?
Yeah. I think this is something a question that Lena and I have talked about a lot in Helmgrad, and really was kind of the beginning philosophy of what we wanted to do with the company, which is bringing other people in through the door with us. I think in building out Helmgrad's mentorship programs, honestly, Lena and I kind of try to we talk about the fact that we're trying to be everyone's rich white parents when we bring them into the business and the industry, and it's because, to your point, Carlos, I mean, there's nowhere near enough access, education. Like I grew up not knowing what a producer was. I didn't know that was a job that you could do. The vast majority of people that do break into the business have connections and relationships, have a parent who's an agent, have, family friends that can build them into filmmaking, but more than anything else, also have the financial capacity to be able to just move to LA and live and create and not have to worry about having a job, not have to worry about having to, pay rents and all that good stuff. And so we were seeing that and noticing it and understanding it, which is really why the Rising Voices program with Indeed has been so crucial for us, because effectively what that program is Indeed, being the massive corporation they are, has invested in this incubator program, which they're giving 10 filmmakers each $100,000 to make a short film, so they can make it at a very high professional level. And then those films all go on to debut at the Tribeca Film Festival. We provide mentorship, we provide access, we provide support, we provide education. And I think that's been an incredible start for us and an opportunity and ability for us to break new filmmakers into the industry. And we're already seeing like the kind of ripple effects of it, and seeing some of those filmmakers go on to direct episodes of The Chi, including now being the producing directors of The Chi, or go on to direct episodes of American Born Chinese, or go on to go make their first feature films. And so it's exciting to be able to be part of that. I think the difficult aspect of it is that's 10 out of the thousands of applications that we get. And so I think what we tend to encourage anyone to do is, you have in your cell phone now the opportunity and capacity to be able to make a movie that you can shoot in 4K and can put on a big screen, and just to start making stuff and putting it up online and trying to gain traction in that way. We flagged and found filmmakers off of Instagram, off of TikTok. And so there's much more abilities and opportunities to be discovered now, but I think it's still a long way to go to sort of provide access points so that we can get more filmmakers with different narratives and different stories to tell. So.
I'm going to ask you a little bit more about that in a second, but Justin, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, so the question is zero budget filmmaking possible?
Summarize, yeah.
Yeah, it's happening every day. If cinema started in the Nickelodeons, and it did, 5-second, 10-second clips, I made 25 movies today on TikTok. I actually didn't. But I think what is a big barrier, in my opinion, is the discourse around what is cinema, what is sort of deserving of our attention, and why. And I feel like all of the capitalistic drives that sort of keep, what was 5 companies is now 4 companies, will soon be 3, and 2 companies afloat, that has invaded all of our discourse. We're here at a film festival to platform and celebrate emerging artistic voices, and all of the conversation at the festival is about what sold, when it sold, was it good. That's not the kind of discourse, in my opinion, that is going to allow a person to grow into their artistry. The greatest filmmakers of all time, I'm thinking of people like Lubitsch, I'm thinking of people like Stanley Kubrick, I'm thinking about people like Spike Lee. They're not there on day one. They have to become that. The biggest barrier to becoming a great, filmmaker, to doing great work, is the ability to do it over and over and over and over and over again. And right now we are in a system where like you live and die financially every choice you make. And so we don't consider some things cinema because they aren't making certain companies money. But I would argue that the kids on TikTok who are making 10-second videos, whatever, they are actually learning about cinema in a very sophisticated way. They're learning about editing. They're learning about, like, frankly, propaganda. They're learning the things that people learned at the start of cinema, like how you can actually like influence opinion, how you can sort of take a set of facts, interpret it this way, that is actually cinema. And we don't regard it as that. And we don't give those kids any opportunity to sort of do that and then also make a living out of it. I think that and I don't know what the answer is per se, but I know that there's just so much pressure on a film and on a filmmaker that has nothing to do with the film being good or them arriving at their artistic voice. You know, I've worked on $0 budgets. I've worked recently on $150 million budgets. And the problems on both ends of the spectrum are exactly the same. Your energy and your attention goes to so many places that have nothing to do with the actual movie, have nothing to do with the art, because of the capitalistic requirements of us as artists. And if we really care about art and we really care about cinema, then I think we have to change the fundamental discourse around it. We have to change the way we talk about cinema. I had this conversation with some film critics last night. Where's our Cahiers du Cinema moment? Where is this moment where the film critics and the people who write about film and the filmmakers decide we're actually on the same side? We want to advance the medium, and we want to have a discourse around film that is not just, did you like it? Did you hate it? Did it make money?
Well, here's a question for you. What do you... Yes, please. What do you think, and for any of you, what is the tension that is preventing that bridge from like truly being a two-way street? And why do you think that all these incredibly talented filmmakers who have found ways to tell very engaging, very entertaining, very thought-provoking stories using nothing other than a phone and their friends and family, the people in their community, or just themselves, they're slowly, some of them are getting signed. Some of the agencies now are repping a lot of social media creators, but there's still this really big barrier where I feel like people in the film world would not really dare to call them filmmakers, and they probably don't even think that these are two universes that share a lot of traits and share, we are all wanting to tell stories for the same reason, but what can we do, or why do you think that is still such a clear line between these two universes?
It's intentional. And again, it's the capitalistic forces. Like, there really was a time when you could fuck around as a film, and I'm talking like the 1910s, and maybe only if you're a white guy, I don't know. But like there are many filmmakers that we love and revere, and you look at their early histories, what they were doing before they were 40 or whatever, and it's a lot of fuck around. It's a lot of movies we don't talk about. It's a lot of shorts. It's a lot of experiments.
Here's 10 minutes of a train track.
Right. It's a lot of that stuff that they got to do that was considered a part of the same thing. As they sort of figured out who they were when they would enter into a narrative feature space or something like that. I think right now we've been trained as audiences by the studios over time that this thing is a film, and it makes things easier for them if everyone is sort of mentally prepared to only accept movies as like comedy, drama, these little slots. It makes it easier for them to make movies and reliably expect to receive money back because it hits a certain sweet spot that they have trained audiences to expect over many years. We have to decide that that's not true anymore.
And I guess for Rishi and Bao, do you, not to say that we're going to come up with the answers right here, right now, but maybe some simulating questions for then all of us to be able to come up with the answers. But what do you think can be done to retrain audiences to accept, true grassroots movies that don't look like the movies that are on this festival, movies that may not be as polished or as technically eloquent as some others that are being done for no money? And what is it going to take for festivals like Sundance to also open up their gates and allow people in who are telling beautifully complex stories, but not necessarily the ones that we've been seeing in these types of festivals? Do you think that there is anything that us as filmmakers or people who are working in this festival or people who are going to watch movies that we can do to get us a little step closer to that?
I mean, it's hard, because I think about it through both perspectives, as the viewer and as a filmmaker, because there's so much things to watch nowadays, and I wish we were back into the days that you can just, there's only 4 networks on television and you can only choose between that, like sort of the tyranny of choice that we all have now. And because of that, I often kind of revert back to this idea that when I'm making a film, I'm sort of making a gift to a viewer because they're giving me 2 hours of their time, right? And 2 hours of anyone's day is a lot nowadays. And so if filmmakers can think about that on the level of like every frame is important, like you want to satisfy the audience, or not just the audience. And what I was taught in film school was that the only audience that you know and that matters is yourself. Like you can't predict what, the 200 people in the theater are going to like. And so for me, it's like reverting back to that sort of concept of satisfying what you grew up with, what you always enjoyed watching. I mean, even the film that's at the festival now that I made, The Greatest Night in Pop, is just this fun ride. And I always thought it coming out of film school, I'm just going to make esoteric films that no one like really watches. But this was my sort of practice in pop culture and just something that's entertaining, really. And so just knowing what brought you back to the cinema, and from the perspective of a viewer, like, trying to understand that someone took their time to actually make this, that, took, 5, 10, whatever amount of years, but years to usually make a film. But we're taught to just be like, okay, watch a film for now we're told like the first 10 seconds of something. And if it's not good, then just flip the channel. And so I hope that audiences can just, and it's hard because I do the same thing. Like if I don't like something with the television, I think the beauty of going into a cinema is that you're stuck in a cinema. I've never walked out of the film before. And I always, because, there's that adage of like, wow them at the end. So even the film sucks the whole time, like just hoping for that morsel at the very end that will satisfy me. And I hope audiences can be, as you like, retrained. I mean, maybe that's not the right word, but like, how can we just get ourselves out of this like attention deficit economy and just like sit back and enjoy and live in the moment of what we're watching?
I think if we really take a look at it, one of the big issues is that the studio system is exactly the same studio system that it's been for the last multiple decades. And the bigger issue than that is the people that are running the studios are the same people that have been running the studios for the last 20 years. We're seeing literally the exact same older white studio heads circling and going from this studio and bouncing to that studio and bouncing back to this studio. And we have nobody at kind of the top of these places that are really experimenting with things. And we're in a world where, I'm looking at my baby sister who's 23, and she hardly goes to the movies. She watches a lot of TikTok. She's on social a lot. She'll go see the occasional horror film, but nothing is really grabbing her attention. Nothing is really grabbing the attention of her and her friends to really make them compelled to go leave their homes and go see something. And so I would love to see a version of almost like a community-driven distribution channel in which we really shake things up. And the issue is, to the point of this panel, is that it requires money and it requires resources. But the idea of getting to get funding together and getting a community of people that include the Justins and the Lenas and the Bows and everyone to go off and give filmmakers the opportunity to fuck around and spend $150K here, spend like $1 million on a movie there, take low risk shots instead of doing what the studios are doing, which is overinflating budgets. Like you see, like the Netflixes and Amazons of the world are doing the exact same things as the studios now and spending $150 million on a movie. And it feels like to us that there is a different method that is actually attainable and not risky, and where you can play and give people coming up on TikTok, giving filmmakers that have short films here at the festival, and do things that feel quintessentially less risky. Because I think the barriers to entry so much are involved in capitalism and money and people being afraid to take swings and everyone being afraid to lose their jobs if they give the untested filmmaker the chance to make something. And so I would really love to see that to be a shift now. And I think it also is going to honestly be people investing back into their own community. It's going to be looking at Wall Street and looking at Silicon Valley, looking at all the Asian people out there, looking at all of the black people, looking at all the people of all the various backgrounds who now are living in a place where we have money and have like capital to be able to spend on things and invest in stuff. And we need to start supporting one another, because otherwise nothing's ever going to change.
Rishi, did you go to film school?
I did not. I actually went to business school. I was
business
at NYU, and I was on track to go to Wall Street, and realized that I wasn't really a Wall Street guy.
Cool.
And but then met so many filmmakers who were also at NYU in the film program, and realized a lot of them needed a producer. And so
cool. I was asking because I know that Justin and I went to the same film school. I know, Bao, you just mentioned you also are a film school kid, but I was just curious if you have any thoughts on the role of formal education and whether obviously, YouTube, obviously online learning has become sort of like this incredible tool, not just for filmmaking. But why is there still this school of thought that film school is really the only way where you're going to be able to become a proper filmmaker? And that, of course, there's a lot of examples that prove that theory wrong, and there's a lot of great filmmakers who have skipped that stage or just haven't been able to afford it. But there's still just this belief that in order to like really understand film in a specific and nuanced and academic way, you need to attend to one of these institutions that a lot of people just can't. So just curious if you can think of alternative ways of getting that type of education, that level of education that don't require people going into debt for the rest of their lives.
The best thing I got from film school, went to the same film school, was practice. And that is free. The thing is that like when you're on TikTok and you don't think of it like practice, you think of it like follower acquisition. You think of it like, oh my God, this thing only got 2 likes, so I'm devastated. But at Chapman, we got to make a lot of things that nobody really saw. We got to like make a lot of mistakes. That was great. I think the myth that there's some kind of like education about like the way of making a movie, like this is a proper film and this is the proper way to make a film, that is absolute bullshit. Because as a little gay boy of color who, felt like my access to the greater world was to follow all the rules, boy, was I surprised when I got into Hollywood and I realized nobody is really especially white dudes are not following any of these rules. Like, some of these guys don't give a fuck about 3-act structure. There are no storyboards. They don't know what they want. They have the money to spend and sort of find it. No one else is playing by the rules, so the rules are bullshit. But you find out how you make a film through experience, and you have to decide, what am I doing? What am I making this for? Like there's a lot of things I've made that exist in a commercial way, but my reason for making them wasn't because I wanted to make, it definitely wasn't because I wanted to make money, or because I wanted to advance something in my career. It's because I was curious and I wanted to try something. And I think like you have to give yourself that permission. And I do, like, I don't know, if I was a kid and I had TikTok growing up, like you have permission. Like what's stopping you from making shorts with your phone? I know that that's a little frustrating because making shorts with your phone right now doesn't get you to helming a major feature film, but I promise you need the practice, you need the experimentation, you need the room, and that's something you can just do for yourself. I think the more and more I've like done stuff in the industry, the more I realize like I have to always have a film practice that's for me. I have to always be making stuff and truly not care who sees it. There's stuff that I make that has no distribution plan. I'm just practicing, And I think I think you have to invest in yourself first, and we have to kind of get out of this mentality that like it's on the other side of something. I think that's the annoying thing about film school, because what you learn is 3-act structure. You basically learn Aristotle's Poetics, but in a new form, and that's great for some films, but that's a very European way of thinking. If we look at, especially if I'm thinking about movies like Killer Sheep, Do the Right Thing, Daughters of the Dust, these iconic films that inspire me, those don't play by any of those rules. Those films are constructed using, honestly, more African narrative styles that are not about single, rugged, individualistic hero overcoming the odds. Those movies are not that, and they're fantastic. And when they happen, people are like, oh my God, I've never seen a film like this. But it's because these folks had enough practice and encouragement in their little bubble that like, no, this weird thing you're doing is great and it has a history. And there's people who've been doing it for centuries, actually, in different forms, as plays, as novels. And you're not alone. You need that encouragement, and you only get that through trying and failing and coming back and trying and failing and coming back. So I think like we give permission to ourselves to a lot of other people. We got to stop doing that. It doesn't matter if you went to film school or not. It really does not. But what matters is, have you given yourself permission to fail and try?
I love that.
I think on like the point of Justin of like sort of practice and being able to fail. One of the things that, when people ask me, should they go to film school, I tell them honestly, the best thing for me coming out of film school was having a community, like a group of other filmmakers who I could fail with, who I could practice with, who could watch movies with, who we can talk with movies about, right? And, there's great places like Macro, like Sundance, like Gold House, like Hillman Grad, that are building that community. So I think we have to be able, for us, as people who are making it in the filmmaking world, to try to keep on building that community. Yesterday at the director's brunch, Robert Redford's daughter said something really beautiful. When he was building the Sundance Institute, he had the opportunity to build an empire, but he built a nest. And I thought that was really beautiful. And I think we all sort of keep on building nests for each other, for the other generation, because if film school is expensive. I mean, I just paid off my loans like a few years ago, and so if people don't have the means, then I just tell them, if you can find other filmmakers out there, people who love movies, and again, practice, fail, and understanding how to fail. I think that's really important, because as Justin was saying, if we fail, I'm trying to work on my first feature narrative, and I'm really scared to fail. But I think of my favorite filmmakers, like Barry Jenkins, and his second film is my favorite film of his, right? So there's so many filmmakers who their second film is, because, I mean, not to say that they failed on their first, but they had that practice, right? And they were able to make their second film. And I think for us, how can, from the film school perspective, build that community that is the best part of film school?
I agree. And that's also a thing that's very accessible, and we know that online. So I think a good takeaway is that the two things that we got from film school are very easily accessible, and maybe we trick ourselves into thinking that we don't have access to some of these things, where we really do, more than ever before.
But also, I got to bring it back to the discourse thing.
Yes,
because
please.
the way we talk about films is fucked. It's psychotic. It's toxic. It's fucked up. Okay. Because that's free education, actually. Before I went to film school, I was in a magnet theater program in Houston, Texas, and that actually taught me everything I really had needed to know as an artist. And one of the most important,
I think theater may be a big answer. You're saying this, sorry, please keep going. Yeah. But something really resonates, because
when we learned how to engage, because I'm a black kid in Houston, I've never really encountered some of these playwrights. I've never encountered Molière or Shakespeare or these kinds of things. It's what the fuck is that? If I encounter it with the language I was given, I'd be well, that's boring, and I'm not interested in it. But we were taught a whole different paradigm of how to engage in art. It wasn't, did you like it or not? That's an interesting question, but it's not the only question. The question is, what is the work trying to do, and did it achieve that? Those are the two, they drilled in us a way of analyzing and evaluating art that didn't commodify the art. It explored the art. And that's something I had to learn, and it opened up a way to watch things that I never would have watched before, and that have fed my soul. Some of my favorite movies, I had to watch them 8 times before I got it, but I was willing to do that because the way I learned how to engage in the work. And I think it is part of that attention thing, that you were talking about. We just we don't really want to invest the time to see if a thing is going to pay off. And I totally get that. But a lot of that is just around we don't know how to really talk about things that maybe rubbed us the wrong way, or that we even loved. We don't really know how to evaluate them and have a really rich conversation. Because even if you know how to evaluate something in that way, even a movie you don't like, you can get so much out of that movie from the conversation around it. And I think we're all really impoverished by the way that we talk about.
When I think also, if you think about theater and the fact that you're making incredibly impactful stuff, arguably you could do it with 2 or 1 person, and just a space, and you don't need all this other stuff that comes with filmmaking. That is what I think makes it so inaccessible. The fact that you need to spend millions of, hundreds of thousands of dollars on equipment and cameras that are becoming more and more inexpensive, but still, just in order to have a proper camera package and the proper crew to operate it, that's thousands and thousands of dollars. And I think theater is just the best example of really needing nothing more than humans to be able to change lives through storytelling. So I really think when you talked about theater right now, and I would love to ask you a little bit more about it, I think that a lot of the answers to why filmmaking is not accessible could be answered through theater, and just why this has been a medium that has existed for so much time, and it's still here and it's still impactful. And if you think about, you can put a play together and then just use a phone, and all of a sudden you have a movie, and a movie that's likely very, very compelling. So anyway, I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Thought exercise. Oh, sorry, Rishi, you have a thought.
No, I think the one thing that I would just jump in, because I think the discourse thing is really, really important. And looking back on my journey and not going to film school, like I had to play a lot of catch up when I got to Hollywood, and it was a lot of reading a ton of stuff, reading a lot of scripts, watching a lot of movies. Like my parents did not let me watch R-rated movies till I was 17. I did not have, I didn't know anything really coming to the business. And I think what I learned is that your individual taste is really all that you have. And like, I imagine as a filmmaker, it's developing your voice and the kinds of stories that you want to tell, but consuming as much material and as much content as you can, and getting the opportunity to think critically about it. And you might love something that someone else might not love, but that's okay. It's like, I think a lot of times when I was coming up in the studio system, we were taught that, if we missed a project or we passed on a script that some other studio bought, that we were in trouble, that we weren't doing our jobs effectively. And the truth is that not every executive, not every producer is the right person for each piece of material. And for us to start like accepting that and the nuances and the gray areas, and that some people are gonna love things, some people are gonna hate things. That's art. It's like separating the commerciality from really, what it is to like make things that like go out into the world in a real way is really, really important.
As you were both just talking, I was also thinking about the process of making something, and you brought up theater and how expensive it is to make a movie. And I think part of the reason why films are so rushed is because it costs so much to have the people, to have the equipment. And that's why we end up rehearsing 2 days, if you're lucky, before an independent film. If you're lucky, I produced a movie called Dee Dee. We did not get 2 days. We got an afternoon before shooting, because actors had to fly in, because we couldn't afford, because SAG rates, because, well, the strikes were happening, and that made it difficult in different ways. But I something about theater that I think we should really adopt is this like love for the process, and allowing time for things to brew, for people to learn,
Yes.
for people to like exist in a room and throw ideas around. And I think I would love to see if there's a way to try to bring a little bit of that into the filmmaking world, because it's really a tragedy that you work for, some people work 10, 15 years to put a movie together, and then you have a month to figure it all out. And it's not just a month to figure out, it's a month to figure out also while you're location scouting and answering budget questions, and
Your energy is everywhere but the thing you're making.
Yes. And then your actors come here, and your actors, you package them through an agency, and you get them for a week, and then they have to do the thing. And then by the time you're like actually thinking about the storytelling, you have to shoot in 2 days.
Yeah.
And then the fact that films that work, it's miraculous that films work. They really shouldn't, because I feel like everything about the process is designed for them not to work.
Yeah. But it should, and it's always hard. It's always gonna be hard, but it shouldn't feel like miraculous. Like, that is the thing about theater, is the economics of theater aside, because there are also economics involved in theater. But you look at something that makes it to Broadway, right? Like, it workshops for months, if not years at a time. You're not expected to have figured it out, like opening night. Like the point of it, there's just an understanding that like you said, we're going to get in the room and we're going to feel this for a minute, and we're going to go home and we're going to sleep and we're going to think about it, and then we're going to come back and we're going to. That's just like kind of built into it, and we don't really. There's not an equivalent really in the way film is currently made and financed. It almost feels like anything that makes the artist comfortable is forbidden to spend money on. But actually, like Aaron Sorkin said this, like you can't actually write well or direct well or do anything well in the arts unless you're like in a good mood, which means like not like I remember leaving this festival after Dear White People and being like, I'm going to get evicted next month because we didn't sell the movie at the festival and I don't have rent for February. honestly, I'm glad I made it through that period, but that's not like the best environment to produce the mental health required, to endure.
Bao was just talking about this, and you're talking about failures as a first film and how that could break someone's career, but also people who have very successful, very well-regarded films still finish their festival circuit and then just have to sit at home and look at their bills and just say like, holy shit, I guess 5 years before my next movie, well, I better find a side job because otherwise I don't know how I'm going to survive. And that's another tragedy.
You need a beat to be able to just think about the work. And it's so hard to find that.
Bao, another question for you, because as Justin was just talking, it seems to me that documentaries may be just a little bit closer in that regard of allowing having time to find a story, finding time to sit with your thoughts, finding time to like try stuff out and then take it back home. And do you feel like we can learn a little bit more from documentary filmmaking in terms of not having this super rigid process to make movies and allowing ourselves to get lost a little bit and allowing ourselves to have the time to find ourselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of documentaries are made in the edit. And so most of the time for a documentary, you're there at least like 5 or 6 months just doing an offline edit. And when I talk to, my friends who work in fiction and I hear like how little they have of amount of time to actually sculpt a film, it's scary. And I think, again, it goes back to like how much we're allowed to fail. And even when we're in it, like in the edit suite and trying new things and on the scripted side, like looking at different takes and things like that. And so, as I sort of dabble in the fiction world, I hope I can take some of that documentary side of me, but I understand like the economics of it as well. I mean, I also produce. And so from the producing side, there's just like, you just can't have like more than 6 months in the edit, right? And that's just, you can't break that. And sometimes as this panel is called like no budget filmmaking, a lot of filmmakers on the doc side work, for literally no money, hoping that, we get a sale at Sundance or we get some sort of acquisition later on. But that shouldn't be the system that filmmakers should be working in, is that, deferring their livelihood, their salary for cross fingers hope that they're going to sell.
And I think another thing that we can learn from documentary filmmaking is that we don't necessarily need a script to start telling a story, because I feel like that is another barrier of entry that, English is not my first language, and I remember it took so long, like decades, for me to convince myself that I could write. And I know that so many people don't even dare to think about being able to make a movie, dare to think about being able to write a script for whatever reason, because maybe they haven't had education. You look at Aaron Sorkin and you're like, oh, well, that's a writer, right? And unless I can do what Aaron Sorkin does, then I am just a person who dreams about writing. So I think, in my opinion, I think that there's something so empowering that I hope could be adopted from this idea of, I know a person who is fascinating. I know a person who went through this crazy experience. Let's just spend some time with this person and see where this may lead. And I'll meet their family, and then their family will tell me stories. And like that's a movie. And you don't need to have this document that is, academically sound before you're giving yourself the permission to get a camera and film it.
And of course, like if you go back to the 70s, right? Like Netflix is having a big, aren't they doing like a thing about the 70s filmmakers or something?
Okay.
I don't know. I maybe read something about that. But you go back to a lot of those filmmakers and they were not doing this. Francis Ford Coppola famously went out into a jungle somewhere and figured out what Apocalypse Now is going to be. We're not all going to have that luxury, of course. But it occurs to me that when you were talking about theater, and also when you're talking about the script thing, And I think the way I want to put it is we got to normalize failure, because failure is really important in an artistic process. And when you talk about theater, you have a lot of room where it's cool if you fail. You're supposed to fail. This is a workshop. Calm down. This is not opening night. And I think back about what Lena and I were doing when we were broke as hell, and trading phone calls about how to get through the Vietnamese line on the EDD because the English line was always busy. We would have nothing else to fucking do, and we would have no opportunities. And so we got our out of work actor friends, and we would just like do table reads. Table reads is like not quite a play, but we had an audience, and we would hear it, and we would hear what people thought about it. And you weren't expected to like nail the table read. The point was to hear it and get feedback, and you as the writer kind of maybe even confront what your work even is, because you've been in it writing, and all your blind spots are still blind as hell, and it was okay in that environment. This is one thing that I want to say that is hopeful. That is free as hell. Like, that really is free. Like, you really can do a table read. When I talk to people about like, well, have you done a table read, or have you done mostly what I'm feeling from them is a fear of failing, a fear of hearing the script back and be like, oh my God, my script is horrible. Everybody's script is horrible. Like, the first draft of every script is horrible. So it's okay. Like, we got to normalize that. And that's something we really can do for free. Be terrible. Just kidding.
We have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to invite you all to do this thought exercise, and that's if you had to make your next movie for $0 and using only a camera, friends, what do you think you may want to make this movie about, or would you do anything specifically in terms of bringing it to life? Like, you're like, I would ask, my family to act in it. I would edit it using TikTok. Just any thoughts that may come to mind in terms of like how you would approach a zero budget film, and maybe let's call zero budget just having a phone and spaces and people to shoot. Rishi, I'm gonna go with you first.
I can give the producer's answer to this question, which is from like a content perspective. Like, when you have $0 in your iPhone, you shouldn't be trying to go make the thing that is like the big epic period piece or the kind of like massive drama. Like, thinking about like things like low budget horror films, thinking about genre. There's this wonderful little film called Coherence that was made for like no money, that is friends at a dinner party, and it's parallel universes. And so people come in, they go out. When they come in, it's the same actor, but they're a different parallel universe version of it. I think you got to get really clever with the concept and think about things that would entertain you and entertain your friends, and things that you'd enjoy sitting around and watching. Because if you're making something with your friends, you'd hope that you're making something that you would all want to go buy a ticket to. So yeah, I think about genre. I think about a cool concept that you can make with not too many people, and I would just go for it. And I hope a lot of people do.
Bao, can I pass it over to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would get all my film school friends and go back to like that sort of era of when we were filmmaking, and have like a marathon of watching like Cassavetes films, and say, we're going to do that for a week, and we're going to just see what happens, and whatever happens, and not think about like, is it going to get sold? And there's a liberation of doing something for no budget, because then you don't have to sort of, you owe people things because they're giving your time, which I think is even more important than, their money in many ways. But because of that, just the freeness of independent cinema and the liberation of like not worrying if it's going to get sold, or even if people are going to watch it, I think that would be how I do it. And again, going back to film school, but again, having a community that's willing to finding a community that's willing to do it with you. Like, you want everyone to do it with you.
I hope you get a chance to make that move. Justin?
I love Austin Kleon. He's like one of these Instagram guys. He talks about show your work. That's his whole like philosophy. His whole thing is like, while you're making the thing, put some of it out. And that's kind of honestly, like, that's what we did with Dear White People. Like, we ultimately made Dear White People for under $1 million, but I was willing to do it by hook or by crook. And before we got money, I was testing out Sam White's jokes on Twitter, and I didn't have TikTok, but I might have used that. You know, I feel like you can make little bits of it and test it out while you're doing it. And while you're doing that, you're also building an audience, because you also need an audience on the other side. So it probably looked like that. I mean, I feel like I've been making things for $0 for most of my life. So I would just do it. I don't know. I would just make it. Like you said, I get some friends, whatever the vision is, I'd take what I have and I would just do it, you know, and find a way to know what people were fucking with and weren't fucking with along the way. There is so much liberation in that process that I miss, actually. Because when you're making like a big studio film, you don't have any contact with like the real world at all. Like, there's no way to do that, and I miss that about like the early days of trying to make web shorts and, you know, web series and all the stuff I was doing, you know, in my 20s. Like, I miss that.
Thank you all so much. I think we're going to be hanging out here, so if you have questions, please come up. We'd love to talk about it. I don't know if you're all heading somewhere else, but yeah, I'll be here. Thank you all so much. Much appreciate your time, your thoughts. You're all brilliant. And
Dee is excellent.
Go see Dee.
Thank you, everyone.
Many thanks to Carlos, Bao, Rishi, and Justin for that excellent conversation. And an extra special thanks to Anti-Gravity Academy, CAPE, and Macro for bringing it to us all. As I mentioned up top, you can find information about each of these organizations in our show notes. And as I also mentioned up top, this episode is part of Anti-Gravity Academy's Satellite Sessions, free monthly conversations with high-level individuals in film and TV whose objective is to decentralize resources and information and make them available to as many up-and-coming filmmakers as possible. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, be sure you are subscribed to us, the Dolby Creator Talks podcast. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're curious to know more about the Dolby Institute, head on over to dolbyinstitute.com. There you will find information about all of our programs, subscribe to our mailing list, and access the entire library of episodes of this podcast, including all the other satellite sessions with Carlos that we've already released. Until next time, this is Dolby Creator Talks. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. And our production coordinator is Karen Marroquin. Thanks for joining us.